ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात्। ओम शांति शांति शांति। नमस्ते दोस्तों। Sri Muruganar was one of the most important of Sri Ramana Maharshi's devotees. He spent over 20 years being lovingly devoted to his Guru Sri Ramana, and he was, to my knowledge, the only living person who Sri Ramana said had realized the self. In the wonderful text Sri Guru Ramana Prasadam, Sri Muruganar writes verse after verse after verse, explaining how through his Guru's grace and teachings he too came to fully realize the self. The viewpoint that there is a phenomenal world is given as a provisional hypothesis, principally for those of low and middling attainment who are the vast majority and who do not have both an intense longing to realize the truth and a total absence of desire for sense enjoyments, resulting from perceiving the inherent defects of those sense enjoyments. In the scriptures themselves, enlightened Gyanis proclaim that the world appears to the ego mind formed by the no joining consciousness with the insentient Chit Jada Granthi, and that the self remains in total union with that world. Om Bhurabhuvah Svah Tatsaviturevarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Nah Prachodayat. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Namaste, my dear friends. In this video I am going to give Bhagwan Sri Ramana Maharshi's disciple Murugnar's work, Sri Ramana Anubhuti Part 1, later renamed Sri Guru Ramana Prasadam. This is a very important video. Murugnar's work, Sri Ramana Anubhuti Part 1, later renamed Sri Guru Ramana Prasadam, was written in the last period of Sri Bhagwan's life, when his health was failing to such an extent that the majority of it was never shown to him, although it seems that he did see some of the verses. With hindsight, it does seem, when reading this work, that Murugnar was acutely aware that the sojourn of his beloved master on this earth was nearing its end, and was moved to express his profound gratitude and love in a lyrical outpouring of praise rarely equaled elsewhere in his writings. Robert Butler lived for some years in Tiruvannamalai, studying Tamil at Sri Ramana. He now visits every year and has dedicated his life to understanding and translating Tamil spiritual text. In spite of this, as indicated by its original title, Sri Ramana Anubhuti, this work is not simply a work of praise to a beloved Guru. Its aim also is to express the ways in which the realization Anubhuti conveyed to Murugnar by Bhagwan's grace transformed and indeed subsumed his entire existence. Despite its relatively loose structure and the fact that it is preeminently a work of praise and devotion, the work also eloquently evokes the experience of the devotee who embarks on the journey to discover his true nature. The following short article attempts to illustrate this aspect of the work. As with the vast majority of spiritual seekers, Murugnar's journey begins with a sense of dissatisfaction with his orientation towards worldly goals and ideals. I was a learned fool. My flawed mind knew nothing until I came to dwell with him whose glance filled my heart with the light of awareness, dwelling in that gracious state of peace whose nature is mana, so hard to gain and know. I entered into union with the deathless state of the knowledge of reality. Indeed, as Murugnar was to discover, spiritual knowledge is as much or more a question of unlearning than it is of learning. Learned though I was, that unique nature wherein I appeared an untutored simpleton who uses a mark to sign his name became my own. Lest anyone should assume that spiritual knowledge is a free good dispensed at will by the Guru, Murugnar makes it clear that the disciple too must play his part in this process. One may argue that realization is not possible without a teacher, but there can be little doubt that the grace of even an enlightened Guru cannot benefit one who is incapable or unwilling to apply himself or herself to the task. I nurtured the crop of divine love by enriching the field of my heart with the manure of firm resolution and plowing it well, plucking out the weeds of false ideas as they arose, watering it with grace and erecting the fence of unflagging self-inquiry. Thus I came to taste the bliss of Lord Shiva. With spiritual practice come insights, and in this work, Murugnar gives vivid expression to a number of these. Here he explains how the mind, when left to its own devices, operates as a self-serving mechanism that will propagate its own existence by identifying itself with the objects that it encounters through the senses. The nature of vasanas, inherited dispositions, is such that we take them to be ourselves. This propensity of the mind to identify with the objects of habit and desire is like that of bees that instinctively rise up and rush towards nectar the moment they see it. To explain why this should occur, Murugnar introduces the reader to the concept of pramada, the act of forgetting one's true nature, or put another way, the identification with the body, mind, that is the result of that act of forgetting the self. Those who, through the mental error of pramada, the forgetting of one's true nature, go about taking that which is other than consciousness to be the I, will go mad and meet their ruin. Locked in the prison of birth, engendered by their deeds, their existence will be a sad and weary one. Clearly then, the mind is not to be trusted. To realize through investigation that the nature of reality is beyond the reach of thought, and to slow off that treacherous mental imagination, making the heart our permanent place of abode, that indeed is the pellucid state of supreme jnana. However, a question remains as to how this treacherous mental imagination is to be eliminated. If the mind cannot be trusted, in the section entitled The Enquiry That Leads to True Jnana, Murugnar speaks of how this might be achieved employing the method of Atma Vichara, investigation of the source of the I sense as advocated by Bhagwan himself. The network of thoughts that fills the mind branches out from the perception I am the body. The proper course of action is to ask the question, what is the place in which this I am the body idea has its source, and thus reach and become established within the heart. This section, containing many finely crafted and insightful verses, was published in its entirety in a previous edition of the Mountain Path, to which the reader is referred for further reading. In Bhagwan's radiant presence, however, Murugnar had no need of any such tools to accomplish the task of controlling the mind and senses, as evidenced by the large number of verses that give us some idea of what it must have been like simply to be in that presence. He who nurtures all things within his own self through the power of his consciousness, eclipsed my own self's firefly glimmer with the blazing sun of his grace. The illusory world of the senses, created by the lustful mind's teeming desires, disappeared completely, and as I came to dwell at my spiritual center, a state of equanimity reigned within my heart. Murugnar's evocations of Bhagwan as the living exemplar of supreme reality, that which alone is, are lavish in their praise. Through the joyous power of the true love that took as its goal the feet of my Guru, a life lived in the vast space of the self that shines fearlessly within the heart, burgeoned forth within me as the unfailing awareness that its mana grew stronger and stronger. Birth's suffering was abolished, and I became fearless as I obtained the vision of grace. He entered my heart, imparting the state of supreme bliss upon which it is delightful to dwell. Grace flowed sweetly from him as he filled me with the richness of Mona, the beauteous life of Shivam, that is, the experience of the knowledge of the self. My eyes well, he stood granting me the vision of the real that was sweet to my sight. He is fond of casting himself in the role of the faithful wife with Ramana Shiva as her husband, echoing the conventions of classical Tamil love poetry. I cannot remain separate from my Lord. When his transcendent reality pursues me far and stands revealed as my own nature, how can I live and be separated from my lover, the self, the consciousness that shines in the heart? These verses, though, are not evidence of a blind devotion which absolves the devotee of any responsibility for his own salvation. In Murugnar, there is no question of a conflict between the paths of bhakti, devotion, and jnana, inquiry. Sri Guru Ramana Prasadam shows them to be entirely convergent and interchangeable as evidenced by the following. I show my deep gratitude to him who brought about his victorious rule within my heart by maintaining self-attention without a break. There is no other way than this: benedictions upon the glorious self that shines alone within the heart through the non-dual truth of its self-nature. Thus, Murugnar shows us how, through a combination of intense devotion and inquiry, the antics of the mind will finally come to an end. If the nature of the mind is closely investigated, the mind will be resolved into consciousness and give way to the mono of final liberation in the unalloyed clarity of the self. This, however, is a process that has a final twist. It is the person making the journey that must end, not the journey itself. I saw him as the wise one with the power to destroy the effects of my deeds. Little did I realize then that he would destroy me as well with a love greater Even than that of a mother, he put all and to me, deeming it most beneficial for me. The loss of the ego self is a terrifying prospect indeed for the unenlightened devotee. Srimati T.R. Kanakamma records in her Tamil biography of Muruganar how on the occasion of two of his early visits to the ashram, he felt compelled to flee the presence of Bhagwan due the intense fear he felt as Bhagwan's physical form became incandescent with light and the world around Murugnar and his own sense of identity melted away to step into the seeming void beyond the mind and senses requires a leap of faith. Know that those glorious feet which lie beyond the realm of thought are perceived differently according to the minds that reflect upon them. To those who affirm their reality, they are the light of the eternal, and to those who deny it, they are the dark void of nothingness. Such Muruganar tells us is the paradox of the devotee's arduous journey. They are the feet that cannot be gained without the loss of the very self that set out to attain them in the first place through its own efforts. Murugnar's verses show us how, having prepared himself through the assiduous application of self-enquiry, he was able, through the power of love and devotion, to make that final leap of faith and allow the knot of the mind that bound him to his physical body to be finally and irrevocably severed. The noble Lord who dwells in the auspicious Mona that shines as the life of transcendent grace took my very heart for his temple as he cut through the knot Chit Jada Granthi. That heart grew, expanding and blossoming to become the pure expanse of the self. Translator's note: in late 1992, I was approached by the late A.R. Natarajan to translate into English the long out of print Tamil text of Sri Ramana Anubhuti Part 1. This was eventually published in 1998 under the title Non-Dual Consciousness, The Flood Tide of Bliss, Sri Ramana Anubhuti. Meanwhile, in 2004, Sri Ramanasramam republished the Tamil text in the revised format established by Murugnar himself with the help of Sadhu Om, now retitled Sri Guru Ramana Prasadam. This revision was unpublished and unknown to me at the time of the original English translation. In 2006, therefore, I undertook the task of retranslating the work in its new format, an undertaking which enabled me to remedy many of the shortcomings of the original translation and to bring to the work the fruits of what knowledge and experience of Tamil and of the works of Sri Bhagwan and Muruganar I had gained in the intervening years. This task is now complete, and I am proud to be able to offer to devotees this glowing portrait of Sri Bhagwan and his teachings as seen through the eyes of his most renowned devotee Mukavi Kanna Murugnar. So this ends the video. Thank you for watching this video. Namaskar, my dear friends. Thank you.